Hey guys, this is Scott from phasingplayer.com, and this is the third part of my Nate Hayden interview. If you have not listened to parts 1 or 2, go check them out. They're on youtube.com slash phasingplayer or soundcloud.com slash phasingplayer. In this part, we talk about Mushroom Eaters and the horror game magazine titles that Nate put out with Emperors of Eternal Evil. For those that are unaware, Mushroom Eaters is a game where up to 5 players go on a psychedelic trip after drinking some mushroom tea. Throughout their journey, they will have to contend with various complexities of their mind and their environment around them. Mechanically, the game is pretty straightforward. Players play a card from their hand, and that will move a singular piece, representing all of the players, along a colorful pattern across multiple board segments. Like many of Nate's games, you should really go just take a look at Mushroom Eaters. Go look at it on Board Game Geek. The board is one of the craziest boards I've ever seen in a game. It starts off pretty small, but as you get to certain points in your journey, you will flip over sections of the board, expanding your journey into new horizons. How did Mushroom Eaters come about? Because you had said not that long ago, I think, that it was originally a Hobbit game before it became
Yes,
Mushroom Eaters.
it was The Hobbit. Keith Myers. Oh man, I don't even remember when I made The Hobbit. Um, but because of the Hobbit movie coming out in some whenever that you'd have to backtrack from whenever that came out, and then maybe 2 years before that came out, they were already saying, "Hey, we're gonna have to have games for this." So Keith was like, "Yeah, you should present a design. Present a design to these people." And I love Kinesia. I love Beowulf, and I love Lord of the Rings, the game. And I love that track system. I when I was a kid, I loved Candyland, although it's a terrible game. But the idea that you're going, I really loved just all the pictures of Candyland, and I was going. And as a kid, I thought I was going to those places, but you're just playing this weird hop, like this weird color thing. But I love tracks. I love games with tracks, and so I made the Hobbit game, and it had all the same bold board folding out and everything. And I showed it to the guy, but Kinesia already had a track game, so that was the end of that. So then I just put it off on the shelf and didn't even think about it for a couple of years. And then one day, I don't know, I just had this hankering that I was like, I think eating mushrooms would work with this, somehow, and just sort of began to. So I took apart the theme that it originally was, and then adapted it to another theme. So that was how that came about.
That's very interesting because yeah, like when I played it, it felt like I could not imagine any part of of that game being something else. And so to hear that it was originally not only a different theme, but like a licensed IP was like almost mind blowing to me. Like I almost could not believe it. Because it feels like it marries the idea and kind of the feeling a person has when they're on like a mushroom trip or an acid trip, with sort of the way the cards come out and the pieces move around. It felt like they married together incredibly well, and so. Yeah, it's wild right now. Even hearing you say that, it's wild to me that it started its life as something else. So you had said, I'm going to my Board Game Geek archive here, that making a game about mushrooms or a game about tripping was something. It's a story you always wanted to do. It's stories you wanted to tell. Had you tried making games or making art in some way around that theme before?
Yeah, the very first game I tried to make for Keith's class was based on psychedelics, and it just didn't work. I don't even know what I was trying to do. But I don't know why. When my experience with psychedelics was it was almost initially, like the very first time I knew that there was going to be some sort of art thing I'd have to do about this. I don't know what it was, and this was back in like 90, 95. I don't know. It doesn't, like right now, like in my life, like psychedelics. and even marijuana or stuff like this. It's not like it doesn't hold a super significant part of my life in some sense, but I find that it's very, I take that back. It does. I definitely revere it, but I revere it to where I don't actually really want to do it because it's too special. Like I don't want to suck the specialness out of it by doing it too much. And so I hold a reverence to this because it's, if you're gonna just wind back all of the ethnogenic experiences of human the human race, it's just fascinating. Alcohol, being in mead and tobacco for the Native Americans. I mean, all of these things are these things that jet you into something, and people recognize that it would jet you into like you would go into a different world. We look at it and go, oh, you're just drunk or we're just high. But I still don't really feel like it's that simple. I think in some sense we're neglecting the technology in a sense. I think it's a unique button. It presses a button like alcohol does make us all, our spirits kind of begin to meld with each other. And like, we can go, oh, well, it's doing this because the brain is doing that. But nonetheless, that button that we're pressing is almost assured that these particular things will happen, and you can do things with that button. You can do things with these different types of button. Now I love to just casually drink and certain things like this, but like they're each one of these things we could look at, and if we go back even further to the Rig Veda and Soma, this created culture. Like people, they said the poetry of the Rig Veda ends up creating, in a sense, civilization in some ideas of civilization, and so on and so forth. And so you're looking at these like even now. I mean, I don't know what they're doing in Silicon Valley, but let's say they're doing some of these things in Silicon Valley. Is this, and even the computer itself, is it not somehow some of these ideas coming from these ethnogenic things? And like we're able to have almost like some ideas of programming and then how the computer can work are ideas that are given to us almost by these plants in some sense. It's just fascinating to me. And so at some early time, I thought, this is important for me to express some reverence to later. And I don't know when I'll do this. I don't know when it will be, but it came out in that game.
Yeah, I think it really comes through pretty strongly. It's we played it with 5 people. 3 of them had experience with psychedelics before, be it mushrooms or LSD, and 2 of them had never had any experience with that. One of them is straight edge, and one of them just had never done psychedelics. And kind of the line was divided exactly kind of between those 2 groups of people, as people that like wrapped their head around mushroom eaters and sort of understood maybe what it was doing. And those that were like, this is just a bunch of disparate, unconnected nonsense that is a really simple game mechanically that has a theme that is illogical. And it, like, the way I've sort of been thinking about it is it's a game. It at least to me, I'm curious to know if this was by design or if you agree with this or disagree with it. But I feel like it's a game that appeals to people that have had psychedelic experiences but might not communicate to people that have not. It might not come across at all to people that have never had that experience personally. And like, would you agree with that, or do you feel like maybe that's not the case?
I don't know. I mean, if people that have never done it and they play the game and they kind of maybe understand maybe something, that I think I'd be very glad that happened. But I definitely, people that don't want to do it, I as far as do those types of drugs, I'm don't do them, please. I mean, like, I don't think they need to know or anything like that. It's not like a need for them to know or anything like that. But I think if they do play the game and come with some come find an understanding or look at the game and go, and because it is very simple mechanics, really. It's very basic in a mechanical sense, and you just look at the mechanics and you try to win the game based on the mechanics. You can totally do that. I mean, absolutely. I have, I know I play with people that like themes do nothing for them. Sometimes they're just like they kind of figure out, okay, here's all right, I got to go after this, and I'm just going to go after this. It doesn't matter anything else that's going on in the game. Like all the theme is just nothing to them, and that's perfectly, man. That's absolutely fine. For me, I like themes in games, and I like the marrying of the two. I think when they both work, that's pretty neat. And with that, I think I was just trying to marry the two.
Well, yeah, I think you did quite a good job marrying the two, the theme and the mechanics.
Yeah, but if people want to just look at that game as mechanically, it is very basically basic. But I still think even if you just look at it in a mechanical sense and try to play it, you're not necessarily going to win by taking away the theme. You still have to do certain things, and maybe the guy that knows a little bit about mushrooms might actually have an idea about what's going on, because I think stuff like the panic stuff or stuff like this, I don't know, may be completely meaningless to somebody who's just looking at it in a mechanical sense. But you may be able, maybe you have an edge, maybe you don't by knowing it, but nonetheless, it's for everybody. It's if you could play it looking at it in two lights, and probably many different lights.
Sure. The people that had psychedelic experiences, I found, were playing maybe a little friendlier, a little more cooperatively, whereas the two people that had never had those experiences before were kind of trying to take as much aggressive edge as they could in terms of victory, which I thought was kind of an interesting split.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Yeah, you probably might be more gentle if you kind of know what's going on. But if you understand how you, but honestly, like in just a general psychedelic experience anyway, a person that is more hard and so on and so forth, his selfishness can come to the fore, and that's just more honest about who they are, and I don't know. I like that. I like that might pop up,
You've in a more like, I guess, practical topic about the game, I think you've suggested that making the board was very difficult mechanically, like physically putting it together was kind of a tough task.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what can you say about that?
Well, the first edition I made was all handmade, so I just handmade the board. Like I think it did like 100 games, and then we did another edition that was like 500 games. That the first one, oh man, those took a long time. You just had to glue each thing. So that I think it was like 6 panels, and then you would have to. It was just tricky, and I was trying to do a print and play of that, but it just didn't make any sense. It just was too difficult. But then when I did print it at a shop, to get the foreman to do that was tricky, to just sort of warm him up to how he was going to do that and how he could even do that. Like they just don't get that kind of job at the print houses often. So you'd have to go, okay, well, it has to do this, it has to fold exactly like this, it has to be this amount of sizing in the cut, and you had to be on top of everything of the creation of that board. And the foreman had to be kind of smart enough. And I met this one guy. He was great. This guy Michael, and he was just so good with different projects. And he left the place that was doing that, and a new guy came in. And like within the first meeting, I was like, this guy is not Michael. Oh man. he just was like, Michael was maybe in his 40s, maybe mid 40s. And this guy was like getting like in his 60s. So he was just kind of hard assed. And I was like, oh, this guy is going to be hard to work with. and I just have not found another guy I feel could even do it. So if I don't know if I'll ever make that again, but if it would take a special prop print house, that I just know that could do it. I just have not met that print house guy yet.
Well, I'm very happy to have a copy. It was one of the quickest, I think, high-rated games that I've ever kind of slapped a rating on, because it spoke to me in a meaningful way, and I'm very happy to have it in my collection. I know a lot of people are looking for it. It along with like Cave Evil, I think, are probably the two games that command a big price on the aftermarket when they pop up. We've talked a little bit about mythology sometimes, and I feel like Cave Evil and Mushroom Eaters are a piece of mythology that you've kind of put out into the board gaming world. And if you don't have intent on putting Mushroom Eaters out again, I feel like it's going to kind of exist in that realm forever.
That's neat. I just don't know. You just never know. That's what I remember talking with somebody just about how this is one thing I think is really neat about games is that you really don't know if you'll ever see these things again. Like pick any game. Raw, for instance. You would think Raw was going to be there forever, but then there are these periods you can't find Raw all of a sudden. And you got to wait for some other publisher to make Raw, and maybe they won't. And so it just that's what I love about the hobby in a sense. They're not going to be permanently there because the way that the printing works, it just can't it can't be this like weird permanent thing unless like we design just print on demand and it does it really well. I don't think it's been done yet. I think they're getting there, but for now, at least in the market and for what it's been, you had to get the game or you may not see it again, like whatever game it may be. And so it creates this sort of excitement of, oh man, I got to get that game. It's, if it runs out, then the aftermarket's going to be way too expensive. And it just kind of creates that. And it's natural. It's not like forced or anything like that.
Yeah. It's like the beginning of Indiana Jones. You're like digging in the desert for an artifact.
It is a little bit, yeah. Like some of these games, you'll never see them again.
So,
there could be classics.
Sure,
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
A game that I feel like this is somehow turned into the Phil Eklund discussion, but I've been kind of digging for a first edition copy of Lords of the Sierra Madre, one of the first games Phil Eklund put out.
I have one of those.
Oh, no kidding.
And I haven't played it. But what's funny about that is that was sitting at this shop that I would go to all the time, and it would just sit there. Every time I go in, I'm like, no one's buying that game. And then I just had to get it one day, but it was just sitting there for a very good price, just nobody getting it for years. And finally I was like, okay, I get it.
It's crazy. It's a title that I'm talking to a guy right now. I think this virus has maybe thrown a wrench in my negotiation gears, but I've been talking with a guy about it for God, probably like 2 months now. And it's like, again, it's like this mythological thing. I've seen pictures of it. It looks like 8.5 by 11 pages taped together to make a map and these like flimsy paper components and all this stuff. But yeah, it's like this artifact that exists out there in the world somewhere. And this person, I can like almost like project like with my mind this image of a guy, of a dude in Arizona pasting together these pages and printing out these things from his desktop printer, and it's got this like energy to it that
maybe I don't have the first edition. Like, is the first edition?
No, am I ruining your world? Am I like destroying what you think you have?
I
right
have
now?
An edition of it, but maybe it isn't the first.
There are two editions.
It's like then I don't have that one.
There's the Decision Games put out an edition.
I have. Yeah,
okay, so that's I'm sorry to tell you, that's the second edition of Lords of the Sierra Madre. Came out in 95, and it is probably one of the highest quality productions of any Phil Eklund game before like 2000. But no, the first game.
I thought that was pretty available. I thought you could get that pretty easily. But
the first game is from 1988. He made it, and it was sold in an accordion like folder that he pasted a printed like label on, that said Lords of the Sierra Madre. And the game map is, I think it's, let's see, like 4, 8, 12. I think it's 12, maybe 16, 8.5 by 11 pages. He printed out from a desktop printer and taped and laminated and taped together, and like sold. And like they had this weird like accordion folder. I think he handmade about 100 copies in the 80s, and it was, I think, sold before Sierra Madre Games was even an officially like, like an LLC or anything. And it's this game, and then the second edition is very similar. It's very similar, but it is different a little bit mechanically. The first edition has a hex grid, a hex map instead of like area control kind of thing. And yeah, it's this title I've been looking for. I have a first edition Insecta, and I'm looking for a first edition Lords of the Sierra Madre.
That would be a neat one. That would be really neat. Is it pretty pricey when it does come up?
You know what? There is exactly one data point on the internet. For its MSRP originally when it launched was like $40, and there's one aftermarket data point, and it sold for $30 in 2016. But as far as I can tell, on Board Game Geek, on like a history of eBay sales, on anything, it has never been seen on the aftermarket online except that one time in 2016 for $30.
Wow.
And so I'm hoping to get my hands on this copy, and I would love to archive it on online in some capacity.
That would be great. I'm looking at a picture of it. Man, I had no idea this one existed.
Yeah, man, it's crazy thinking about where Phil is now. Not that Phil is like selling millions of copies of anything, but he's putting out $300,000, $400,000 Kickstarters and selling several games a year and all sorts of things. I love the image of this guy in his basement or garage in the 80s making games by hand, and like he just has this passion for this thing, and honestly, that's something I love about your games too, is I feel like the passion you have for these games or subjects or whatever it might be really comes through in a lot of your titles. And regardless of if I play a game and I love it or I'm lukewarm on it, I feel like that energy, that passion really comes through in a lot of your games, which is one big reason I wanted to sit down and talk to you tonight, because to kind of pick your brain a little bit about where that passion comes from for these titles and how you kind of get to a finished product that contains all of this energy and isn't like diluted by the time it hits the printer.
Yeah, the medium of gaming is so cool that we found the medium. I don't know. I get that from Phil. Like, he found the perfect medium, because he could have just written books, but we would never have found it. We would never have read his books. Maybe we would have, but I mean, I don't know. But the thing is by playing something like Origins, I understood, more about different aspects of human development by playing that game than I probably would have by reading a book. So what I get when I like with Phil is I feel like he is expressing all this stuff you're going to learn. You're going to learn all this stuff in this game, and whether you know that you're going to do it or not, or like High Frontier, and my dad being from aerospace, I actually understood a lot of what was going on before I went into that. But the way, but he even added more to my understanding of the space, and so what you have is, so we have this way of presenting information. So we could read a book, and I think books are fantastic. I read many books, but you can also, from a game, like by war games, I've learned so much by just playing war games about different periods of history. Also Euro games, like it might be a particular period of history that the Euro game is talking about. So you have a vehicle. It's like a kind of vehicle or a media that is able to incorporate this thing, and then you learn this thing by playing the game. And then, but then on top of that, you have the entire history of gaming. So gaming in general is just this thing that we'll do all the time in life. We'll just create a game. If we're just two guys, especially when you're kids, you'll just invent a game in like 1 minute. But like to pass time, you'll just create something to pass time. So then you have just the art of the mechanics of things and so on and so forth. So it's just a wonderful medium. I don't know, just a wonderful medium. I get that with Phil. Definitely, I couldn't think of that guy doing anything else. But what he's done is really just remarkable, and these games filled with very relevant subject matters that are actually in our educational systems and so on and so forth. And he's done just such a great job of making these things understandable. And then you can go off and learn more about these things through his games. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about giving someone agency over the learning material. I feel like war games especially, maybe you can read about, I don't know, Erwin Rommel, or some other big like war moment, and you can read about their tactics or that their individuals like mindset. But if you put a map in front of you and say do these things, it can really put things in a much different perspective, I think, by putting you in control.
Yes. It does. I just finished this game called Maharaja, and it's a Britannia system type of game. Mm-hmm. And both of Britannia and Maharaja just are very basic games. I mean, like they're kind of a risk-like kind of role game, very, very simple. But you sit and you play 1,000 years of Indian history or 1,000 years of British history, and you actually absorb what is going on, even though maybe this didn't historically happen in these exact same ways. I found myself going off and learning about the different armies in the Maharaja game. I guess like they're shining. They're like this weird shining thing that like does more than just it's more than just sitting around a table, but even that's the great ritual, just sitting around with friends that are around the table.
Absolutely.
It's so many different things that are really neat.
Let's talk about a handful of your games right now. What about the magazine games you've put out? Psycho Raiders, Freak Face, Sea Evil, and most recently, Don't Let Wolves Eat Our Babies. Don't Let Wolves Eat Our Babies is definitely up there as a favorite title of mine for a game. So these games all came out at different times over, I think, about 5 years. And I call them magazine games because they are released in a magazine. They don't have a box. They have components made of paper and cardboard that you need to cut out yourself. And included in the magazine are comic books, advertisements, little stories, all kinds of stuff, even a centerfold. And they are pretty cheap, I think around $30. And they all have different mechanics, but kind of share the same central system. So I'm lumping them all together here because they are sort of part of a series. Now, a common element of all of these games is having a few kind of regular humans go up against either a supernatural force or just an overwhelmingly aggressive human force. Now, because these are simulations, the regular humans are, of course, at a huge disadvantage. And honestly, most of the time, they will get their butts kicked pretty quickly. But that's part of the simulation. It's a horror simulation. If you have, say, Friday the 13th, Jason is never the one that is weak or the one that is getting his butt kicked, at least not until the end of the movie. And so that's what these games are trying to do. They're trying to put you in the shoes of the guys that get killed in horror movies. Unless, of course, you are the killer. These are not cooperative games. There will be one or maybe a few players that are going to be the overpowered guy, and then the rest are the little weaklings. There's a chance you'll win, of course, and you'll certainly have fun trying to win, but it's really the sort of emergent stories the game creates and fighting against overwhelming odds that makes them worth checking out. What was the reason for switching to a magazine style of production for these things?
Well, I fell in love with magazine games when I started playing just strategy and tactic games with a friend of mine, and we would just he had a bunch of different strategy and tactic games, and we were going to go through his whole catalog, but we never did get it done. But anyhow, I just this format to me was just perfect. I mean, I being near the printers, I knew how to do everything about how to do that, and it didn't take a box. Boxes can be kind of a pain in the ass in printing, and because there's such a huge volume. So you like imagine you do a game that's 1,000 games, and you have 1,000 empty boxes in your house. You know,
Sure.
it just gets crazy. And so this seemed to be kind of the answer for me. Now I know people might be they may want the box, they may want this type of thing, but for me it makes a lot of sense in a variety of different things. I at the end of the day, you're going to be at a table surrounded by the game pieces, but you're going to have to store this, and you know these storages can get your storage space can get very small pretty quick. So it I don't know, but to get to the brunt of it also let us do more artwork and more comics and more just things that are interesting to us. Like when you talk about look, we grew up with like zines, and Matt Brinkman's a big part of like zines and stuff. So it actually kind of helped in that sense too, to be able to use these as a medium in that sense as well. So it just really worked for us. I don't know. I love magazine games and strategy and tactics. I still love. I'm probably going to play one here soon. So um, it's to me just a wonderful format. Another thing I like is it causes limitations. When you get these boxes, you begin to think you can kind of add everything you want. I mean, and you just go, well, yeah, let's just add more of that. Let's print that. And we'll have these little wheels that do these things. We'll add more pieces, add more pieces. But with a magazine game, you have you're confined. You have a limit. And for some reason, I love that. I love having kind of a limit. You know horror movies and so on and so forth, and I just love like movies that were just like 70 to 90 minutes long. Like we didn't have to go longer than this. It was just you had to get all the horror in this 90-minute little clump. Or you know, the horror movie would be made in 2 weeks. You know, like we shot and filmed this horror movie in 2 weeks, and it was like a great classic. You know,
And for like pocket change, right? Like I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a kind of a classic example of that, of a movie that was shot in a short amount of time in kind of rough conditions, you know, sweltering hot Texas heat, and it was made for like less than $100,000, maybe even less than like $50,000, which $50,000 is a lot of money, but for movies it's nothing. And it became this like, you know, immortal classic of not even horror movies, but of like cinema and American culture. And it was those limitations that probably helped them do that.
I tend to think that is true, and like Evil Dead, you know, like
100%.
You know, you ain't got much money, kid, and you got 4 weeks to shoot this, you got 3 weeks to shoot this, you know, and you got to get it ready by the film fest, and you know, I don't know what it is. I think it sort of creates maybe a little bit of adrenaline or something. I don't know. You have to think on your toes.
I think you have to be clever. You know, you have to say, I have these things in front of me. I need to do something with it. If you have the world's resources at your fingertips, you know, I'm not trying to disparage anything, but you might end up with the new Star Wars movies, you know, where you have an unlimited budget and you have unlimited creative control and you have unlimited everything, and you maybe end up with something kind of bland because you weren't working within this tight creative space.
And even the original Star Wars was a cheapie. You know, it was considered a throwaway for the studio probably at the time. and just let this kid Lucas, I don't know what he's fucking doing over there, just give him 300,000. I don't know how what the budget was, but it probably wasn't much. And they created just this little dream that like a great little world. And I don't know, but those kind of do that for us. Or I like that we just have this confined space and we don't get to do anything more.
And
And
so
then that's
these games are not victory point games, which a lot of your other games are VP games, but the horror game magazines are not. Was designing something around like a concrete victory condition, typically like escape or die, was that a challenge for you? Was that always the design choice, or did you ever have like you're going to score victory points at the end as like one of your early playtests or anything?
No, it was never a victory point concept, I think, ever. I mean, I don't. If a victory point thing made sense for the story of any of those, I would do it. But I think with Psycho Raiders, it was just clear. It's a live or die. It's going to be live or die, and because that would be the stakes of a real thing like that. I mean, I think if you're chased by people and you lived at the end of the night, you're like, thank God I made 12 victory points. I mean,
you killed all the counselors, but you only got 11 victory points, and they managed to get 15, so they win. They're all dead, but they win.
I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I think you maybe could do something with victory points, but at that time, just that particular plot line, it's just going to be about survival. And I think, thinking about it, that type of horror in a mechanical sense, like if someone were to escape, that's kind of a failure for people that are trying to kill those people, so it makes the win condition pretty clear. And I think it was probably that easy when we made that, it's just going to be that.
Oh, what's it like playtesting games that are so like inherently unbalanced, like Sea Evil, Freak Face Psycho Raiders? I haven't played Wolves yet, but they're very like you would kind of immediately say they're unbalanced in favor of the bad guys, and that's sort of the point, right? But how does that playtest when you're playtesting something? Do you say like we need to make sure the bad guys are going to win most of these games, and then are you playtesting to see that they do, or like what is the playtesting like for something like that, something so skewed?
That is very much kind of a simulation approach. So in reality, I think if you made just the concept of it that happening in reality, that you could end up figuring out ways that these guys could turn the tables on the Psycho Raiders or something like that. And so I always just try to unwind, okay, if this was really going on, like what would be happening, and like how could you, and then you kind of balance the characters from there. So I think with Psycho Raiders, maybe the guy was the first balance, the can't remember his name right now, but the main character in that the guy, and then the two girls. I think we developed the guy as he's a perfect neutral thing, and from here we can figure out everything else. And from that, I think it was like, okay, if he is me, like let's say it's me, like what is the guy stronger than me like, and what does the guy stronger than me have, and then vice versa, what's, and you just kind of you start to calibrate the people, and then you add the weapons, and you figure out, well, these guys are weaponless and they are only running, and then you realize that is actually really a horrible horror situation, and that's kind of what it would really be like. And I think it became apparent with that design that the other people that you could bring into the game could start helping you turn the tables on these guys. But that would be what it would be really probably like anyway. So if like four guys were chasing after you, if you happen to conjure two other guys to help you, that would definitely help you a little bit more. So I mean, I think we're really conscious about simulation when we're making those. Like how do simulations work? And simulations simulate like wargaming simulations and that type of thing. People might argue that that's a little it's a different type of gaming than like your standard balanced Go or where it's a battle of the minds or chess, and then you could start naming a whole lot of games. But I still think when you're dealing with mechanics in life, you're dealing with strengths and weaknesses and wisdom and ignorance and just different things like this. So to me, simulation gaming and gaming they're both gaming. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, and I would agree. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. This Origins does have little tweaks. Like they're not. I guess they're all balanced. It doesn't seem like they're all balanced because, like, if you're set up in this one part of the board, you're kind of screwed, and so you have to play a kind of different game. But,
there's what is it? It's like the hobbits, the
I want to say if you're not there,
Denisovians.
you're not near a lot of fuel.
Yeah,
And
I think that's
like
right. Yeah, I think you start down in like around Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he screwed something up. I don't think he did. He probably was being simulated.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think it's just that to me helps in a theme, and maybe that was really a factor. I don't know of the Hobbit people that they couldn't get fuel that much, and so it kind of creates this different type of thing you got to do.
In regards to the magazine games, they're all kind of horrific. I mean, the horror's right in kind of like the series title. What are some of your favorite horror movies? Because a lot of these games feel like they're inspired by horror films, and other horror media as well, of course. But I feel like horror films have maybe pierced the most into like the public mind as far as horror media goes. So do you have any like favorites that you return to frequently just in your general life?
In my general life, like I oh man, that's a great question because I love so many horror movies. I mean, Hammer horror is great, but if I had to go back in time as like a chronological order of some of my faves, like I remember seeing The Exorcist when I was about 3. Something my babysitter watched.
Perfect movie for a 3-year-old.
And that just flipped me out, and then Evil Dead. I mean, I'm just gonna name all the classics,
sure,
like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. These were all just delightful movies. Nightmare on Elm Street scared me. The first one definitely scared me, and I remember though in the 90s I started to just kind of get out of horror movies because I thought like the ones they weren't as fun anymore. I remember the movie that did it was Dr. Giggles, and I was like, Dr. Giggles came out. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know about these. What's going on with horror movies right now? And then it all of a sudden switched into like the ironic horror movies, which I like the screams and stuff. And those are some of them were fun, but I had a lot of fun with when growing up with like the 70s and 80s type of horror. But then as I grew older, I definitely found all the Hammer stuff, and I really find also when I was young, the Italian stuff. I loved the Italian stuff.
Sure, like Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I definitely loved all those.
Yeah, absolutely. Argento, those two, Argento, Fulci, and Mario Bava are like kind of the Italian classics, right?
Yep. George Romero, I loved all his movies growing up. Martin is a great movie.
God, I need to watch Martin. I've it's been on my to watch list for like years. I've never gotten around to Martin.
It's not, in his movies, like it's definitely not maybe the most standouty one, but it's just very George Romero. I don't know, like George Romero was like, you think back to those guys, just they loved doing the horror. I don't know, they just loved it. I don't know, like it was I think there's people that do it still. Like, I kind of like Ty West as a modern one. I actually
what was his big movie? Was it The House of the Devil?
The House of the Devil I thought was pretty good. And then he did this one that was kind of like a Jonestown one. But I mean, they're not the I don't know. They're not the best, but they're not the worst. I don't know. Like
Sure.
they're watchable. Um, but currently, I can't even say currently. I don't know what's necessarily going on
Yeah,
currently.
I mean, you don't need to justify yourself to me. I'm bad about watching new movies. I almost never watch modern movies. I feel like I'm about a decade behind, like what's in theaters.
I know, I know. I'm trying to think if I've seen any new horror. I have, but I just can't think. But this one movie I saw in 2001 became my all time favorite movie, and it still is my favorite movie.
What is it?
It's called Reflections of Evil.
Reflections of Evil.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and
Who made that?
this guy Damon Packard, and I've since become pretty good friends with him, and he's actually done a lot of stuff for us. But and I'm not saying this in any biased sense. Like I was immediately a fan of that guy, and there's no biased thing in anything that I'm saying. But he is a film maker, and he's a filmmaker, and but that movie, man, Reflections of Evil. I got the DVD, and someone gave it to me, and he told me that he's like, here, you can take this DVD. This guy's just giving out these DVDs. Like I don't know, it was like his grandmother passed away and gave him a trust fund or something like this, and he made this movie with the will, or I don't know, with the money from his grandmother. And that was all I heard. So I plopped in the movie, and I thought I was going to watch maybe 5 minutes of it, and I sat through the entire thing. It's like 2.5 hours long.
Oof.
And and I don't know, like that to me was that was, and it still is, the real 21st century movie. Like I don't think that we see a lot of movies, there's like all this kind of stuff we can watch, but that is a 21st century film. And it's not really necessarily horror. It's kind of a horror film. It's kind of a weird thing, but yeah, that is my favorite. And but yeah, other than that, all those other movies I love those movies, and we probably bounce back and forth with like many movies we like amongst each other. I bet.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm gonna go watch Reflections of Evil. Not tonight, but maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, well, if you can get it, man, is it on YouTube? I don't know.
I'll have to dig. I'll have to dig for it and see
Check
what
it
I
out
can do.
if you can find it. I have I can actually probably send you a copy. The bummer about the one that I have is he's made like all these different edits, and
Oh no, he's one of those guys. He edits everything after.
yeah, he's like a living. You talk about living rules.
He's a living
But no,
rules for films.
He made about 2 or 3 different edits of that, and the one that I saw first, I just fell in love with that one.
Okay.
And the one I have is not the first edit. Like we saw the movie in our store, and the one that we're selling right now is not the edit that I saw.
Okay.
So I don't know, but I could definitely send you a copy of that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna see what I can find on my own, but otherwise I'll talk to you and see what we can do because I'm looking at this on IMDb right now. For people listening, here's the kind of quick description of this movie. Julie, who died of a PCP overdose as a teen in the early 70s, searches from beyond the ethers for her little brother Bob, an obese watch seller who is dying of a sucrose intolerance in the early 90s. And the cover is this guy yelling. He's like mouth open, mouth agape, eyes like squinting, like something squeezing his head. Headphones, it looks like maybe a few pairs of headphones. And there's a quote that says, "A film like no other, a nightmare ride," from DVD Crypt magazine. It seems wild. I'm super intrigued.
Packard, man, I don't know. I'm a big fan
Damon
of David
Packard.
Packard, and I can't even believe he's a friend of mine.
Yeah, directed,
and
wrote, and starred in. It looks like also.
Yeah, and
Yeah, he plays Bob.
it's to me a 21st century filmmaking. I think what's going on, what we have here is like 21st century movies. Like movies are like these like almost thrill ride vehicles now, but he's a filmmaker. I really believe that. I think he really is. And I would recommend his other movies too. Like We'll Talk. I can get you a couple of them here.
Yeah, hook me up, man.
But but yeah, I think you might enjoy them. I don't know.
I don't watch new movies, but
Just
I watch a lot of movies, and so I'm certainly down for weird stuff. I don't know if I'd call him the king of weird stuff, but I've been getting into Alejandro Jodorowsky recently.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Yeah, Holy Mountain. Holy Mountain was such an intriguing, engaging, like, just it felt like it went by in 10 seconds. I feel like I could watch that movie 100 times in a day. It's just like such a mind melting, like engaging film that just, yeah. Jodorowsky is the kind of surrealist filmmaker I really get into. David Lynch is the kind that I don't really get into. I don't know. Something about David Lynch I don't really grasp, but Jodorowsky's great. Strange movies are great. People, and really not just in films, to kind of bring it back to board games too, people that try to stretch the possibilities of a medium, an artistic medium, even if they fail, are the kinds of people who I want to see, like, what they put out. Going back to the Phil Eklund that we keep returning to, I feel like Phil puts out a lot of stuff that if I sit down and really think about it, I might not call great games in terms of like mechanics or my want to play them a lot. But I am endlessly like intrigued and engaged with his titles, and I want to know what Phil is thinking and what Phil is putting out. I might, on a Board Game Geek sort of rating system, I might rate some of his games kind of lowly because I don't know that I want to play them often, but I think about them a lot. I think about your Bios Megafaunas. I think about your, Origins. I think about Neanderthal and the PAX series and all these things. I think about them a lot. I don't know that I want to play them all the time, but I think about them frequently. And I feel like that's a good mark of an artistic endeavor, something that gets into someone's head and influences their thoughts beyond actually engaging with the thing. Like, I play a Phil Eklund game or a Nate Hayden game, and they don't leave my head. Once I put them back in the box and put them on the shelf, they're not gone from my consciousness. They stick around. And I feel like that is the mark of, good or powerful. I don't like the terms good and bad necessarily, but a powerful artistic endeavor. And I like movies that do that too. So
I as well, and it can be rare. Sometimes. And
certainly.
But yeah, when you see it, it's something special.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for part 3 of this interview, 3 of 4. So the next part will be the final part, and be sure to check that one out when it comes out. And go check out cave-evil.com. That's Nate's website where he's got all kinds of stuff. If you've enjoyed this or any of the stuff that I put out as Facing Player, please subscribe to the channel either on YouTube or SoundCloud, wherever you're listening. And if you really liked it, consider a donation. Go to phasingplayer.com/donate, and there are a handful of options where you can throw me some money. Of course, not obligatory, but I appreciate every dollar that everyone's given me. People have been very kind, and I appreciate it every single time. Anyway, I hope you guys have a good rest of your night or day, whenever you're listening to this, I guess. And I'll see you in part 4, the final chapter.